November the 21st, 1974, 21 people were killed and 167 injured when 2 bombs exploded in city centre pubs in Birmingham. It was payday. The pubs were filled with young people. Niels McInnes was the first press photographer on the scene.
I ran with 2 cameras and my flash equipment. It was horrible, really horrible. But I had to keep on taking pictures.
After the bombings, Mr McGuinness was prescribed large doses of tranquilizers. He became addicted to them and is still suffering withdrawal symptoms. He talks about the night that changed his life in a documentary to be shown this weekend. Also interviewed retired ambulanceman David Brown. He was briefed on arrival by a fire officer.
There was a little walled off area by the mulberry bush, and they had already put 8 or thereabouts bodies, and he wanted me to make sure that they were deceased.
Lillian Jones lost her husband Trevor.
It took a long time, for us to accept that he wasn't going to come home. He was such a good man. If it had been a rotter of a man, probably wouldn't have cared tuppence or less about it. But he wasn't like that. And he didn't deserve what he got. But none of them did.
The bombings unleashed a wave of anti-Irish feeling. Irish-born taxi driver Mickey Fahey had helped take casualties to hospital.
If you're Irish, you want light. The people didn't want to know about you. They didn't want to travel with you.
Despite such prejudice and the appalling scenes he witnessed, a retired fireman recalls with pride how the emergency services, indeed the whole community, seemed to pull together.
The taxi drivers, the ambulance people, the people in the burns unit, every single person in the emergency service, I thought it was brilliant that night.
The night the bombs went off is on Sunday night at 6:15 on Carlton.
21 people died and 167 were injured on November the 21st, 1974. 2 bombs exploded in pubs which were full of people, leaving the mark of terrorism on the city. Later this afternoon at St Philip's Cathedral there'll be a special service to remember all those whose lives were touched by the bombings. The service is not only for the relatives of those killed and injured, but also the people who had to work that night. Many of them will be talking about their memories on a documentary called The Night the Bombs Went Off, tonight at 6:15 on Carlton.
Lives were affected. On November the 21st, 1974, 2 terrorist bombs exploded in Birmingham. 21 people were killed and 167 injured. This happened at the height of the Troubles in Northern Ireland and IRA attacks on mainland Britain. The bombs were put in 2 pubs in the centre of Birmingham. It was payday. The pubs were filled with young people. This film was taken of a man trying to get away. In this programme, some of the people who were there that night tell their stories for the first time.
One of the firemen said they didn't stand a chance in hell. And I remember that.
I remember like a blue flash, and the last thing I ever remember was crumbling glass.
Nobody's got a right to take somebody else's life. Nobody.
It was really very severe shock to the system to see that this could happen in a town that you're working in.
With these flashing lights, blue flashing lights, for the ambulances and fire engines. I could sense that there was something else which I had to cover. When I stopped my car and someone said a bomb had gone off, I couldn't believe it. Just could not believe it. I'm still nervous now to think about that scene.
Niels McGuinness was the first photographer on the scene.
You had to be alert at all times, 24 hours a day. I used to sleep with the camera at the side of my bed.
On the night of the bombings, Niels was working for the Press Association.
I ran with my 2 cameras and my flash equipment. It was horrible, really horrible. But I had to keep on taking pictures.
Ralph Dawson was one of those he photographed that night.
Just going down into a cellar, total darkness, lots of dust, and you couldn't hear a thing. And then we went down and did it as much as we could to get the people out. Unfortunately, it was too late for the person in the blanket.
And just outside the Odeon Theatre, I saw this fireman, and the expression on the faces. You can read off their expressions that they were shocked.
I didn't know there was any photographers there at all. I didn't know the picture had been taken. We just missed it, and it was just 3 other chaps that were there at the time. I've never spoken of it from that day to this. It's about 25 years, I think.
One of the first ambulance men on the scene was David Brown.
We pulled up and they were bringing out patients from the public house. There was a little walled off area by the mulberry bush, and they had already put 8 or thereabouts bodies, and he wanted me to make sure that they were deceased.
There was people crying, very distressed. I saw an ambulance. And there was an injured man, looked like his eyes, he lost his eyesight, and a woman caring for him. I went inside the ambulance. I don't know why, but I had to take up more and more pictures. I really feel dreadful about it, but it had to be done. It had to be covered.
So many people didn't sort of make it. There must be lots of people with similar memories. Anyways, I'd rather forget it, but I know I never will.
I was 33 when he died, so was he. And he was a great family man, you know, he was just an ordinary man.
Trevor Thrupp was a railway guard, and he'd got an extra shift that evening. He just popped into the pub. That morning, he'd said goodbye to his family and gone off to work.
We were such a happy couple at that morning, and well, we were always pretty happy. I mean, it was a bit cheeky really in the morning because the children had gone to school and I was going to work, and he asked me to go back upstairs back to bed, come back to bed, and I said no, I'm going to work, and I went to work. I always regretted that I didn't stay, that I didn't take the day off work and stay at home with him, but that's neither here nor there, is it? You know, you can't change things like that.
Irene Nash was in the pub with her husband Peter when the bomb went off. Their lives were to change forever.
We decided to nip into town, Christmas shopping. And I said, well, we'll just nip down here for a quick drink then. And that was it. We was down in the tavern in town having this quick drink, and was the nearest person that night to the jukebox, which apparently got blown into the street through those 2 walls. I was knocked out and didn't realise what had happened, but when I came round, my husband says to me, keep quiet, keep down, there's a bomb gone off, I think. And everywhere was totally black. There was a plank of wood leading up into the street. We could see daylight up into the street where people were helping the injured out. And it took us a time to get out, really, because we kept slipping back down this plank of wood on the blood and kicking out arms and legs out of the way. It was awful.
It's like a dream, really. You don't think it's happening to you. You know, you think it can't be true. He's going to come in a minute, you know. He's there helping. And, but we, you know, until the next morning, really, until, you know, I didn't identify him, my brother did. So that's when we knew it was him, definitely. So.
We were cuts, bruises, stone deaf. I think I got off quite light under the circumstances. It's not only the people that were actually in those pubs that suffered, it's the people that were out there dragging us out of the pubs, and the people that were down at the hospital that night, seeing all the injured people come in and seeing everyone in the state they were. That'll never leave them, obviously.
One of the policemen there was Steve Easthope.
I was moved to New Street to close the road, to prevent anything other than emergency vehicles entering the city. Then I, along with other officers, we were sent into the tavern in the town to bring out the bodies. They used us as the stretcher bearers. My wife and my baby were foremost in my mind most of the night, especially as the news was coming out of the age of the casualties from the two pubs involved. They were kids, they'd had no life, they'd done nothing wrong, and then suddenly their lives had been taken from them.
I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck sort of starting to rise. I just felt as though I couldn't do anything sort of in a steady fashion. It was just fear.
One of the Salvation Army volunteers that night was just 17 herself.
Well, I was a songster in the Salvation Army, and we suddenly heard on a news flash on the radio that there'd been a bomb explosion in Birmingham. So Mum and I decided to go straight away. We didn't hesitate. We just put my hair in a ponytail, put my bonnet on, put my boots on and Mac, and off we went. Mobile was parked, and then we carried the urns to where we were needed. It's, you know, a town that's so noisy, you know, it's a town, and it was this eerie silence and just all this rubble on the floor. It was pretty horrific. I was numb, I think. It was like on automatic pilot. It was. I think I remember at the time the shock on the faces of the people who were, you know, dealing with the problem more than we were. We were just there to give a little bit of warmth and comfort, not to. We didn't see anything, but people who had witnessed and who'd been into the pubs were in a real state of shock.
They'd had their soul taken away. They were doing the job because they had to, but the normal enthusiasm with which the services went about the work just wasn't there. It was, the urgency was there, but the enthusiasm wasn't. It was. I think everybody was just absolutely shell-shocked. They couldn't believe this had happened to us.
I try not to think about it, but it is something that I shall never forget.
I can remember snippets of conversation, things about the horror, the carnage, and one particular thing remains in my mind was one of the firemen said they didn't stand a chance in hell. And I remember that. They're saying he mentioned how steep the stairs were and how narrow the emergency exit, you know, the exit was only one exit, in fact. Only one way out, and they didn't stand a chance in hell. And I can always remember that.
It made me grow up that night. It made me grow up to face problems. I didn't realise how bad people can be destructive. The loss of human life.
On the night of the bombing, Bob Wilson's fun fairs were setting up children's rides, ready for a Christmas grotto.
People were coming out of the pub. We went into the first entranceway, but it was sort of all smashed down. You couldn't really get in there, but people were coming out of there.
You could help, but you couldn't do enough for those people. You know, nobody could have done enough for them.
There's some terrible sights.
They all went very quiet, and then it went a bit mad then. Somebody came, I don't know who it was, and said, "Get out." We found something else. We run down the stairs. We had a vehicle parked underneath the ramp, a Triumph. Jumped in it. There's no keys in it. Got out, a bit lively. Willie came past in the motor and he said, "Get on here."
As he's looking, somebody on the top shouts, "Oh, it's the bombers." So I said, "Well, get on the top, get out of here. We're not going to argue. This is not the place to be."
There was a lot of anger in the town. You know, when people said, "There's the bombers." Yeah, I think, you know, I think personally, it's been very sad, but we could have been kicked to pieces.
It was not a very nice incident. As I spun the car around and come out, the policeman told me to stop, and I wasn't stopping. So he told the bus to ram me. We drove back with him, sort of back home, sort of 3 miles. He was on the top of the car. He wasn't just on it for a few yards, because there's nowhere else to put him. And I think he did very well to hold on, quite frankly.
When I first got there was an ambulance there, and then after that it was a procession of black taxi cabs. They were just pulling up one after another, and they were putting people, wasn't so badly injured, into the taxi cab, gone, the next taxi cab, gone, the next taxi, and they were just absolutely, it takes the worst to bring out the best in people. They were excellent, absolutely excellent, you know, because they'd got the radios and they got the transport, because I don't think the ambulances could cope with everything at that, not with 2 bombs at the same time.
We were putting them in, we were sort of helping them in. You get 2 or 3 in, and if they were in a bad way, you just took them off straight to the hospital and left them there and come back to see if there was any more. We did what we could at the time, you know, without thinking about it. It's something you don't think about. You wanted to help, and you did as much as you could. I was just glad that I was there to be able to give a little bit of help, the little bit of help I did give.
I have to admit to hatred of the Irish, of anything Irish. And I think that hatred went on for a few weeks after the incident. And I don't think it was only myself that felt it. I think, generally speaking, the people of Birmingham felt a hatred of the Irish and anything Irish. It's certainly true to say that for a number of weeks after the incident, the Irish community of Birmingham avoided the city like the plague. They went to work, but socially they just did not go into the city. They knew that the people of Birmingham hated them at that time.
There's a big Irish community in Birmingham, and a very good Irish community. And I've got a lot of Irish friends, and it was very sad that it happened to those people, because it was just very, very sad, because they were persecuted afterwards. And, you know, it was something that should never have happened.
I wouldn't drink Guinness. It was just anything that was associated with the Irish, I didn't want to know. Just total hatred. Fortunately, common sense over time prevails and these feelings mellow. But at the time, and for a couple of weeks afterwards, yeah, I just hated anything Irish.
If you were Irish, you weren't liked. The people didn't want to know about you. They didn't want to travel with you. I have had situations myself where people have refused to travel with me. At one time, I contemplated coming out of the capture it all together. It was only natural that it should happen. There should be a backlash. But unfortunately for the people who done the damage and made that carnage happen, they were tarring every Irish person with the same brush, which isn't, you know, most Irish people are genuinely good, happy people.
I've suffered, but my family suffered. My husband became alcoholic, so I got beaten around the place. He just wouldn't work. He became like a zombie. And I was basically left on my own to bring up the kids.
Photographer Niels McGuinness was prescribed large doses of tranquilizers and he became addicted to them. He's still suffering withdrawal symptoms.
200 people injured, over 200 people. And being there and witnessing it has made a change. When I'm talking about it now, I've got pins and needles all over my body, headaches. I think they call it post-traumatic stress. I never said this before to anyone.
I have remarried and I've got a very good husband. He's been very supportive. You know, he helps me with a lot of things, you know, if I have bad days. And Trevor's family, they've all been very supportive of me all the years. And they've been supportive of me changing my life and getting on with my life. You know, they haven't held it against me that I've remarried. And it took a long, long time, you know, for us to accept that he wasn't going to come home, you know, but because, you know, he was such a good man, you know, if it had been a rotter of a man, probably he wouldn't now, probably wouldn't have cared tuppence or less about it, but he wasn't like that, and he didn't deserve what he got, but none of them did.
They weren't soldiers and people like that, they were just normal Blue supporters and Villa supporters. And people like that had just gone out for a top that night.
But what will always stop with you is the waste. It's a total, utter waste of young life, dismembered young bodies, boys and girls. And a lot of these people weren't even 18 or 17 or 16 years of age. And pulling them out, and pieces missing. For what? For what? For nothing.
I think we left about 3 o'clock in the morning. Went to bed and got up the next day and went to school as normal. It was nothing out of the ordinary not to go to school. It wasn't a valid excuse not to go to school. We spoke about it, we spoke about the horror, but I didn't say that, you know, I'd been there and I'd done this. I mean, I think everybody was in a state of shock. I think disbelief at first, and then a few days after, you know, when the full horror sunk in, I was very angry. Very, very angry. And I will never go into a cellar bar, a pub or a restaurant that's downstairs. Never. Never. There's no logical explanation for it at all, but never.
I don't really want to go in any pubs at all, but especially in the centre of Birmingham. I'm more calm now than I was. I managed to walk through the streets of Birmingham without a fear of more horrific explosions. I walk past the Rotunda, I look up at Rotunda and I think, and I have flashbacks. They don't affect me as such, but I do reflect quite a lot. I really do. What happened on that night.
Time's the biggest healer, they say. You've got to put it behind you and sort of carry on now. That's it, but obviously it's a thing you'll never forget. That's there and it'll be with me for my life now, and probably with my kids for their lives too, for what they went through.
We talk a lot, you know, about his stupid ways and his laughter. He had a hell of a laugh, you know, and we keep him going. We keep him going.
Oh yeah, okay.
I'm still proud to be a newspaper cameraman, and I still want to take pictures. I really do, and I feel very upset that I can't take pictures like I did, or like I could do in the past. But I'm still very anxious to think back on that night. Very anxious and sad and ashamed of everything what went on, but I feel very, very proud of the people who helped at that night.
The people acted as a community. There was a reaction. People showed their feelings, showed their grief, showed their sorrow. And, you know, I was proud.
But everybody, I mean, everybody's good to go. The taxi drivers, I mean, the ambulance people, the people in the burns unit, every single person in the emergency service, I thought it was brilliant that night.
I can imagine that many, many people from Birmingham would have done anything to be there and to help. So really, you know, it's a privilege looking back on it, to being able to have done something.
I was a Brummie, helping Birmingham people. I'm just proud to be a Brummie.